Some of the landscapes I'm dealing with in this exhibition, they are friends. I know them really, really well now, and they're intimate little places, and they're also, one might consider, particularly the Settmerthy landscape, it's a very ordinary landscape. It's just Forestry Commission forest and farmland. It's not your classic Lake District landscape. It's not saying I don't want to paint that, but I just find the ordinariness of this landscape intriguing. This exhibition is going to be themed slightly, with two actual landscapes, which is a little unusual for me to actually choose particular places. One is the area of forest and farmland east of Cockermouth, Settmerthy Forest and Elver Plain, and the other is what I call Cleebarrow and Lickbarrow, which is our own particular local landscape above Bowness and Windermere, which is my home ground really. So the paintings in the show are going to be paintings about those two areas, not necessarily of. A lot of my paintings are done from memory, and as far as I'm concerned, the memory paintings are the landscape which I've seen. But if you were to take those paintings back to those landscapes, you would think, oh no, it's actually not like that at all. Exactly like that, but in essence it is. When I'm working towards any painting, I mean any painting has to be done without the aid of direct aid of photographs. If I'm inventing anything, I invent it from what I know. There's a painting I did a few years ago called Northern Landscape. There's a falling river, a big wide beck in it. And I painted that from imagination so convincingly that you could really put your hand in the water. It kept developing in this painting, and it developed and developed. And each time I thought, this is going really well. And then I'd look again and think, I'm not sure. And I'd go out again, say to the Duddon, or wherever it might be, local beck, and watching how the water falls and how it distorts under the water and how long those little bubbles last before they peter out, and it's only a matter of a few seconds. And that's important because it is important for me to try to understand how I would paint that in the waterfall. So that intense study of nature and deliberately going out and looking has to happen. Some paintings I plan out quite carefully. There are other times when I will just put paint down in a fairly abstract way to see what my reaction to the paint will be. And then I draw on that paint, and then I put layers of thin colour down, and I see a landscape evolving. And it's usually a landscape, because even though I don't classify myself as a landscape painter, this is generally what I do. The landscape found me, rather than me choosing to become a landscape painter. I never really wanted to become a landscape painter when I was at college. It was the last thing I wanted to do. Before I went to college, I was interested in the human figure, and that's what I wanted to do. I was particularly interested in Renaissance painting, and I really admired the Victorians for their ability to paint. But when I got to college, the landscape took over to the extent that I suddenly decided, and it was a very conscious decision, not to put human beings, any figures really, in my paintings, because I felt as though there was an overemphasis, and I still do, on our own selves as figures. I mean, we're obsessed with ourselves. So I wanted to use landscape, but I wanted to still show the presence of myself and my feelings through metaphor, which is where the surrealism came in. I was never that bothered about surrealism, but I wanted to put other ideas into paintings to enhance the landscapes which I was producing. So to say this landscape is not just about a superficial thing, it's not just about form of land, it's about other things as well. So all the time I was always putting things in which were of human making. Even if it's just a footpath through a wood or footpath through a landscape, that is a human thing. Landscapes without it, I'm afraid I do tend to turn off. I mean, even in the landscape behind us, this local landscape, it's crisscrossed with lanes, gated roads. There's plantations, which are quite clearly planted by humans. The fields themselves are not as they would be in nature because they'll be covered in forests. So these pastures, even though they look natural, if the animals were taken off them, they would quickly go back to scrub. One thing which is very important in my work is sense of time and place and atmosphere and weather. And when painting ideas come to me, I'm usually in that season or slightly preempting that season. So when it comes to the end of winter, I'm thinking about the spring already. I mean, I think one does. But I have also had the ability in the past to paint high summer paintings in the middle of winter. I sometimes can do this. I get a strong sense of that sort of summer that you just know exists. It's that beautiful, bright, not cloyingly heavy summer, but that bright summer that exists in the back of your mind. You think, yeah, that's what it'll be like. That's what summer's like. And you can feel it in the middle of the winter. Ever since I'd seen the John Moores, it was the big one. It was the one that everybody talked about. And I just enjoyed seeing the paintings there. And there were some big names, and I wanted to be part of that. So the very first year I left college, well, it was the year after, it was 86. It was one of the acceptance years for the John Moores, and I put a painting in. It didn't get in, but I tried again the following time, and I did a much larger painting, and it got in. And I was thrilled to bits to be amongst that group. And I got in 4 successive times. And then in 2006, I did the same thing. I was informed that I'd been selected for the second round. And the next thing I know, an envelope pops through the door, and I didn't actually open it at first. Carol, my wife, opened it. And she called up from downstairs. I was sitting here. She said, "Oh, you won a prize." And I just thought, one of these free kitchens that you've got to go and, or, the timeshare holiday where you've got to go and sit there and be sort of sold a timeshare. Said, "You've won a prize in the John Moores." I'm like, wow, that's incredible. I was just so pleased to actually be there up in the prize winners. I wasn't really hoping or even expecting to win. And now looking back over the 10 years, I have a fairly good idea why it won, because it did stand out. Because I work in such a way in isolation that I'm not in tune always with contemporary changes in the art world. That's usually deliberate, because I don't want to be over-influenced. So I do what I do, and naturally it's not going to look like the painters next door. And I think when it got down there, it had a quality about it which they hadn't seen before, and I think just stood out for that reason. Everybody has their own life, their own experiences in life, and they will bring their understanding of life and what they've seen in the world to my paintings. Quite often people will say, "Oh, it reminds me of so-and-so," which is something which isn't within my experience, but that doesn't matter anymore. The important thing is that I get across to myself what I intended, and it's nice when people see it my way. But if they don't see it my way, I can't do anything about that anyway, and actually it's quite interesting to see how people pick up on something which they connect in their own experience. That's actually quite nice. Actually, I like that a lot these days.